This video is a very, very important one because we always talk about where Bitcoin price is going, how many Bitcoin you need, when can you retire on Bitcoin. All of those things are very important and interesting to talk about. But something that is even more important to talk about is how can you make sure that you take advantage of those Bitcoin price swings. If you have a cash buffer right now, which you are able to buy the dip, you are in a very good situation. So we have to talk about, is 100% all in Bitcoin best? Do you need an emergency fund? Because life hits hard, especially if you don't expect it. What if you have major life expenses exactly at the time where Bitcoin is dropping hard? So today we talk about the real Bitcoin Zen with Jason. Enjoy. We talked also a year ago, roughly last year, and it was the same price. It was the same kind of sentiment. It was all the same thing. And like nothing actually happened in like 1 year. And I think that's how most Bitcoiners kind of feel right now with the price action and all of the things that are going on. How do you feel currently in Bitcoin, and what are you kind of expecting?
I'm not paying attention to the Bitcoin price on a daily basis. I've done that in the past. I've been around in Bitcoin, as we talked about last time, since roughly 2017, end of 2017. And I've seen enough ups and downs to sort of more take the long view. And once one has conviction around Bitcoin as like the ultimate savings technology or pristine collateral for other things, like we've talked about last time, it's much easier not to pay attention to the vicissitudes of every day's price action. It was interesting over the last 12 months, or actually I think it's a little fewer than 12 months since we last spoke. We hit an all-time high in that span and crashed back down. For those of us who've been around for a while, dropping from that particular all-time high down to over 100 for a long time. Was not at all a crash. It was more like just an adjustment. It doesn't feel great where we're recording now in the grand scheme of things. But before I came on, I was looking at the 1 year, the 5 year, and the all-time graphs for the Bitcoin price, and we're like, you should. I mean, that's anybody who's listening to this and hasn't looked at that for a while should look at all time, because we are still so hugely up over the long term that it sort of puts your perspective back into place. And one other thing is, looking out what's going forward, which is the essence of your question, where are we going? I still think that the thesis behind Bitcoin is what we've always thought it is. I think the supply and demand action is the wrong word, but the supply and demand forces that sort of move the price on a day-to-day or week-to-week or month-to-month basis are more profound for the future of Bitcoin than even a year ago or a year and a half ago. I think we're exactly where we need to be. I would love the price to be higher, just like everybody else would. But I don't think that anything has changed in the last year to make the long-term view any less vibrant than it was when we talked last time.
And I think this is the kind of, I call it the Bitcoin Zen, or like the Bitcoin OG kind of flair, whatever you want to call the vibe of that, is that you get if you hold Bitcoin for the long run. So I always tell people, wait for at least 2 cycles. Like if you get into Bitcoin now, wait 2 cycles, 8 years. This is the absolute minimum that you should be into Bitcoin before even judging your investment. Right. If you want to judge your investment by pure market force and not fundamental analysis, just like what the price of it is, which I think is a mistake, but like if you do that, wait 8 years. I myself am not even 8 years into Bitcoin. I'm now around 6 years into Bitcoin. So I'm coming up to that thing. And since I'm in Bitcoin went up more than 10x. So it's like an absolute crazy. It's like 6 years, 10x. Like where else do you get this kind of returns? It's almost like a startup, as we might touch on later also. And so getting to this Bitcoin Zen of just like, I save in Bitcoin for the long run, and I build my business, my life, my family, my health, my friends, all of those things. And I can focus on those things and just like let the money be money. Like this is the thing where I think we really need to to come at for Bitcoiners, and I think it's hard to understand, especially if you are just like 1-2 years into it.
I completely agree. I'm curious to know for on your side. Last time we talked, you mentioned that you're more or less on a Bitcoin standard yourself, and I wonder whether there's been any changes in how you think about it over the past year. Maybe not necessarily based on the price, but based on more and more people coming into Bitcoin. I think the price is really like I just said, it's very much impacted by supply and demand, but the supply. Meaning people selling into obvious demand, supply has sort of kept pace with an increasing demand, is what I've observed over the past year. And I wonder whether A, you think that's true, and B, how it's impacted you and how you run your operation on a Bitcoin standard.
I think there is something, and I'm curious if you also agree with that. I think we should normalize the meme that is out there with HODL, hold on for dear life, don't do anything with it. Yeah. I start to hate that meme. And I get the essence of it, like you should have Bitcoin, not put anything in like weird stocks, or like put anything like into altcoins or meme coins or anything like that. In that essence, I still believe in it. But in the end of the day, it's money, and you should normalize using money for life. If you want to build a business, you need the money. If you want to go on a vacation, you need the money. If you want to build a home, you need the money. Like Bitcoin is not something that should accumulate till you die, and you die with the biggest possible stack. That should not be, in my opinion, the goal of Bitcoin. Yes, maybe you have the goal of building generational wealth and leaving it for the kids and all of that, but I feel like you should use your Bitcoin. I feel like that's why you have it, and enjoy your life. And that's not really answering your question, but that's something I saw that changed in my mind the last 1 year, or maybe 1.5 years, where I see people clinging onto their Bitcoin as it is something that if you sell 2% of it, everything breaks down. Like that kind of a feeling. I don't know if you can relate to that.
I can. I think we touched on it a little bit last time as well. I do think that. Well, I have a couple of thoughts. One is thinking long term about saving and building wealth in Bitcoin does shift how one thinks about what one needs on a day-to-day basis. Do I need a new car? And sometimes you do, right? Or do I need a better, bigger house or whatever? And sometimes where you are is no longer sufficient for whatever reason, whether your family is growing or it just doesn't feel as good as you want it to, and you can afford to move up, or you want to downsize. I'm to again sort of semi-dox myself. I have a daughter in college, and so my wife and I have an empty nest now, and we actually sort of shifted as she was getting to the college age. But it's very, very common for people as their kids start to leave home that you don't need a relatively large place, and downsizing makes a ton of sense. And where would you put your capital? I mean, Bitcoin is the place to put it. But to your point, Bitcoin is a tool, and whether one is starting a business or just wants to not have to work as much, or wants to throw themselves into something that isn't generating income for a certain amount of time, having Bitcoin as a tool to be used, whether it's selling it from time to time or borrowing against it, or just shaving off a few sats on a monthly basis to close a gap. I think it's absolutely reasonable, and we should all be so lucky to be in a position like the OGs who also have a massive income from some fiat type job, who don't have to touch and get to continue to stack at a relatively high rate. That's not the situation that most people find themselves in. I aspire to that, but in the meantime, I'm doing what I can, and the whole point is to stack as many sats as you can. But that doesn't mean one doesn't do what one needs to do for yourself and your family.
I think so too. And another thing with the whole personal finance things, I think that changed, and maybe it's just maybe it's just that I no longer see only the responsibility for myself, but also for my girlfriend. And I try to be more responsible with money, that I actually think is reasonable to have a US dollar or euro or whatever your local fiat currency is, a fiat reserve that can cover maybe a month, 3 months, 6 months, 8 months of living expenses for whatever responsibility you have. I mean, if you are single, 18 years old, like who cares? Go all in, like have fun. Like you are 18 years old, you have no responsibilities. If you're 45, 3 kids and a small business, it's just like very different. And there's like all the things in between. How do you look at like having the personal finance things of Bitcoin, not being all in and being very aggressive on Bitcoin because you know what Bitcoin is, but still being reasonable in a sense where there's a 42-year-old with like 1 or 2 kids listening, like how the heck should you think about the personal finance things of things?
Absolutely. I mean, the work that I do with the Bitcoin Advisor, helping people secure their Bitcoin long term with multi-sig collaborative custody, very much takes all of the stuff you just talked about in mind. In fact, the way I think about it is you've got long-term savings. This is very similar to what my parents taught me way before Bitcoin even existed. But you have long-term savings that you don't touch. You have that in a vault with multiple keys, that, and ideally with somebody like the Bitcoin Advisor, so that that is secured long-term, and there's nothing that will compromise your ability to have that. And then in what you mentioned a second ago, what resonated for me is the idea of having a reserve, whether it's 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, whatever works for you and your lifestyle. I still think that if we're talking about like a 6-month reserve, I'll use the number you talked about. If you have a 3-month reserve where you could just pay all of your expenses for at least 3 months with no new income coming in, I still think it makes sense to have the bulk of that in Bitcoin, but just available so that you can, whether it's on a strike or fold card where you could just put it down and use it as currency, or it's just you're holding it in some way where you could get access to it fairly quickly. I still think that makes sense for something that's as large as a multi-month reserve, right? And then day to day, to your point, whether it's 1 day, 1 week, 1 month, everybody's different, but having that be in fiat and just is, on a debit card or whatever, so you're not thinking about, the price of Bitcoin when you're buying a cup of coffee or taking somebody to lunch. That makes a total sense to me. That's the version that I think about anyway.
Interesting. No, I'm actually thinking of having, I'm not there yet. I come from a place where I was ridiculously long on Bitcoin with like 110, 120%, and like just like having no cash at all. I'm thinking
I have many
now,
friends like that. Yeah.
yeah, and it's not healthy. Like I don't feel good with that. I have to be completely honest. Liquidity was always low with me, and it never was a problem because I always had income to compensate for it. But it's always like a struggle of like, oh yeah, like I need this income. I need to like to build this client. I need to have this invoice out there. Like it's like I'm actually never talked about that on the podcast. Like I was always super low on liquidity, to be as aggressive as possible, and seeing a net worth and you're like, I could pay for everything for quite some time, and maybe never have to work again, like kind of a thing. But at the same time, it's like my liquidity is so low where I'm like, why don't I build a euro, for me it's euro reserve, where I can easily pay 3 to maybe 4 months of things just to have it there. And then this is like my point. And if I have less than that, I put it in my fiat reserve. If I have more than that, I just put it in the Bitcoin reserve, of having the not stress out around the price. And also it allows you can then have strategies around like, hey, the Bitcoin price is like 40% lower than all-time high. maybe I go from 3 months to 2 months. And then, hey, the Bitcoin price goes, is like at an all-time high. It's like ripped like 2x the last 1 year.
Maybe shave a little off.
Yeah, like not even cheating, like off, just like the new money coming in, like going into the fiat dollar reserve rather than Bitcoin. I think James Jack usually talks about this weighted DCA and all of that. I don't do that yet, but I'm thinking more and more. And also we had recently, sorry for like rambling on for so long, but we had recently a guest, Stephen Pernod, on the podcast, and he actually talked about that the perfect allocation to Bitcoin is not 100%, but around 75%, because you need that cash reserve. And he talks about cash reserve can be stretch, which is super interesting, or just like actual cash. And using that, if like Bitcoin goes down, you can lower that and like put more into Bitcoin and like try to kind of use it as a buffer rather than having 100% Bitcoin, and that you actually end up with a better portfolio and a better long-term performance if you don't have everything in Bitcoin, because the liquidity gives you something to play with.
Yeah,
I'm not 100% sure of that, because like people when they play they usually lose. But you get my point of like having like actual cold hard cash.
100%. The one that's near and dear to my heart, my wife and I laugh about it pretty often, actually. If you play it too close, to your point, if you have if you don't have enough in whatever bank account you're using to pay for whatever's coming in, right? Think about recurring charges, whether it's insurance or, well, there's any number of them, right? Like we all have recurring charges, and the dumb example probably is your internet bill and your streaming service and stuff that just hits, and a few of them don't hit always on the same day. And so sometimes, I'm sure you've experienced this, there's just not enough in that bank account when a thing comes in, and you get a little notice from the bank saying, move some money over here, please. And we have checks and balances, so we're not ever actually defaulting on anything, but there's a little bit of stress there, right? So what we'll do, we're imperfect at this, but we've gotten better at making sure that there's enough of a reserve so that there's literally no recurring bill that can come in as a surprise. And to your point, one manages that as best one can. And there has definitely been time when we've been plowing into Bitcoin and not leaving enough to make sure that a bill is going to get paid. Anyway, it's not that big a deal. These are like relatively these are good problems to have, for sure. But I definitely, like you, it sounds like I much prefer to not ever have to worry about some random bill. The hard ones are there's a bill that I'm thinking of right now that comes in every quarter, and it's a little weird, like what day of that third month it comes in, and it's a relatively large one because it's a quarterly bill as opposed to a monthly one, and depending on what cycle we're in, or where the Bitcoin price is. In the past, we've definitely had to scramble and transfer money just to make sure that there's no problem. Anyway, I don't like that any more than you or anybody else does. And so, yes, having enough of a cushion so that never happens, and then rebalancing, as you talked about, on a semi-regular basis, and keeping in mind what the price is a really wise thing to do, and is makes for a little more harmony, a financial harmony, shall we say.
I'm actually curious because I see it now with myself a little bit only in the starting, but like I'm super young and I just get started now with 27. How has in your life, as you mentioned, you have a daughter, a wife, I think wife, I actually don't know,
yes,
but like
yes.
your wife, and so like how has your personal finance mindset changed from being a single man to being married to being a father, of being like now you also run a startup? Like how have those different life seasons changed your view and mindset around personal finance?
Well, the single biggest change was having our daughter. So I said she's in college, so it's almost 21 years now. That was the single biggest inflection point for me personally. I can't speak for my wife, and we all grow up in different ways, right? The financial circumstances of her and her family, it was somewhat different from mine. Professional class parents, but varying degrees of financial success. When my wife and I got married, it was the very beginning of the 2000s, and so the great financial crisis hadn't happened. So we've had some ups and downs financially, just like so many people around the world have had. But to your point about how I've how I've thought about it, and just being specific around the family component, um, becoming a father was a huge change. So prior, I can't remember if we talked about this last time, but I know I've said it before. Um, Prior to our daughter being born, even getting married, it didn't really change my time horizon, the way I was thinking about whether it was professionally or financially. I was thinking more than 2 or 3 months out, but it was difficult to sort of see where I would be more than 6 or even 12 months out. If you're in a like a long-term steady job, it's much easier and it's pretty linear, right? But I've always been sort of entrepreneurial, even when I was just an employee in the entertainment business. That's sort of it has sort of a gig and entrepreneurial sort of mindset that sort of gets baked into you. But I couldn't see really beyond 12 or 18 months, even at the early stages of my career. But when my daughter was born, suddenly paying for college became a real thing. Not from a stressful standpoint, but having a target that is that far out was really, really useful. It was also it was part of that thought process, or the change in my mindset, that made me start thinking about building businesses, or building a business at the time, thinking about what I wanted to do with the next 20 years. It was very much part and parcel of that process. What am I going to do so that when my daughter goes to college, that we're not worrying about a $50,000 tuition bill or whatever. I don't remember what the numbers were at that time, but by the way, that's the scope we're talking about now. And $50,000 in after-tax income to pay for tuition is a pretty tall order, especially at the time when I was in my early to mid 30s and didn't have a piece of business or a business that I'd already started that would clearly get me to that point. So that was really sort of the mindset change of, I have 20 years to build something. What do I want it to be? Well, what industry do I want it to be? Like that, it was a set of active thought processes, like within a week of her being born. I'm not kidding. It was that concrete for me. And I'm not exactly with the same place that I would want to be because of a variety of things. A great financial crisis was a bit of a financial setback. I co-founded or founded a handful of companies, and the outcomes of those, and I've had several small exits, but the outcomes of the exits, people don't talk about this too often, but if you sell a private company to another private company, the success of the acquiring company really impacts, your future, and it's suddenly no longer just a thing that you can control. And so those outcomes were not, they weren't as, let's say, success is the wrong word. They were successful as far as I was concerned, but they didn't end up where I wanted to be. I'm not going to start a new company. In fact, I'm starting a new one right now. I'm not in a position today where I can just stop working if I don't want to. We have resources which make it possible for me and my co-founders to start this new company, for example. But getting back to the mindset thing, it really sort of extended my time horizon. And then once I found Bitcoin, and got past that sort of gambling phase that everybody was sort of thinking about in the mid-teens, 2017, 18, 19, in that era, maybe 16, 17, 18. Once I got past that, the long time horizon that I'd already sort of become accustomed to was, mapped well onto where we are with Bitcoin today.
The first thing that every Bitcoiner does, and the most important activity that every Bitcoiner keeps on doing, is buying Bitcoin. And I personally use Relai to buy and sometimes also spend or sell my Bitcoin. And there are two main reasons why I do so. The first one is it's Bitcoin only. They do not do any shit coins. They do not do any cryptos, any stocks, or anything else. This is a tool, an app that is fully focused only and solely on Bitcoin. The second one is self-custody. They give you the keys to your Bitcoin the moment you buy them. You never give them the control over your Bitcoin, and you don't have to trust them because you can verify that you and only you have the keys to your Bitcoin. There's no third-party risk. There's no freezing of your assets. There's no rug pulling. There's nothing of that. Download Relai, the app, on your phone, or go to relay.app on your browser and use code Robin to save fees and get cheaper Bitcoin. I want to tell you about something very special to me. It's called Microseed. If you hold your Bitcoin in self-custody, and you should, you know how critical it is to secure your seed phrase. You should not have them on paper. You should not have them on anything else than titanium. With Microseed, you can engrave your 12 or 24 word seed phrase, the entire seed phrase, onto a 1-inch small washer. Yes, just one washer. All 24 words on that one washer. You can hide that thing everywhere. And even better, you don't need to buy a new kit every time you have to get a new wallet. You can make unlimited backups because Microseed is not selling the washer. Microseed is selling the device that stamps the washer. So you get the full kit with the device, with the washers, with the hammer, with everything you need to get started today, and you can make with that unlimited amount of backups. Go now to microseed.io. It's super interesting for me to say. I personally don't have kids, but I'm too young. Maybe I should have soon. But like I see this, and I asked this question actually quite some time on the podcast, but especially I asked it also like off the podcast, off the recording a lot. What has changed when you got a kid? And this is actually something that comes out a lot. I realized, and I hear that sentence a lot, I realized that I have to provide for that kid. It's no longer just about myself. And yes, to a certain extent with the wife, it already comes a little bit. But your wife is still a human being that might be self-sufficient to a certain degree, at least. This kid cannot work. This will come in this existence and is fully dependent on you. He cannot eat, he cannot work, he cannot walk, he cannot do anything. So you have to take care of it. And there's something where all of a sudden your horizon goes above yourself, and this is something I've not experienced again myself, so I don't want to talk like as an expert on that topic, as just not experienced myself. Just from the experience from all the other ones that I've seen, it seems to like make something bigger out of your life than just yourself, and you have another human being. Maybe you got lucky with twins, then it's like two others, and so on. Maybe you get after a year another one, and like it just gets more and more. I interviewed I forgot his name. I interviewed a guy that has 12 kids on the show, not Elon Musk. And I
cannot imagine it.
It's crazy. I met him in Vegas actually last year, and it was so fun because we ran into each other on the airport with all the kids. It is crazy. Like he had two, the wife had one, and then there were like all the other ones in the middle. I'm like, wait, like that's a football team right there.
Totally. You could have a whole side of football or rugby probably. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I'm a relatively, I think most people are self-interested first and foremost, maybe not actually selfish in that sort of negative way that we often think about. But when I got married, I've been married twice. I was married briefly in my late 20s. And we split up fairly swiftly. And then I've been with my wife now we got together in 1999, so more than 25 years now. 20, good heavens, it'll be. Anyway, sorry, I will gather. But the point is that once you make that commitment to somebody, the truly long-term one, thinking about whether it's providing for them or just being accommodating their needs and particularly the time needs, and this is, I'm getting to that with fatherhood in particular. The time needs are important, right? You're not just doing whatever you want all the time. You are accommodating somebody who is literally family, right? Accommodating a family member is a meaningful thing. To what you sort of alluded to about being a young father, I was not particularly young, but I was in my mid 30s, and so I wasn't like running around hanging out all the time, but I had an active business life in the 5 or 8 years running up to that, and the time dynamic is the biggest single change. The financial commitment is serious, but the minute the minute you get home from the hospital, you have, in the US anyway, you have some hospital bills, but the dramatic impact it's not that big a deal. Like, I'm sure that there are less financially fortunate people for whom diapers and all the rest of it is a huge burden, and I don't mean to minimize that, but for the bulk of people, it's a manageable extra cost. Over time, though, the time commitment is what really, really changes. And what I found, first of all, I should say, my wife was committed to being a stay-at-home mom, and we were able to do that. And part of that, the actual conversation that we had was, you bring home the bacon, I will take care of the house, and all you have to do when you come home is be present with us as husband and father, and contribute. But it wasn't like the minute I walked in the door, she was out the door, and I was suddenly having to be solo dad or something. It wasn't like that. It was optimal for me personally and for us that we were able to do that. And my point is this, that, and it's very much a mindset change, where I couldn't see more than 6 or 12 months out until she was born. My priorities completely shifted the minute she showed up as well. Like, it was not at all a burden to get home, to play with her, to read to her, to just be there. Not that I'm up in her grill. One of the things we did was, by we, I mean my wife and I, we actively talked about what kind of parents we wanted to be, like how there's this term, and I don't know if you guys have it in Austria, but the concept of a helicopter parent who's always just sort of hovering over things, versus somebody who's a little more hands-off. We were more on the hands-off side. Like, let's give her the really, really good boundaries, but let's let her have as much agency within those boundaries as possible. We wanted her to get accustomed to making decisions for herself. And that worked out great for the kind of kid that she was and the kind of person she's become. It really worked out. But my point is, just to land this plane, is we talked about what kind of parents we wanted to be, and then back to the difference between being a single youngish man versus a married youngish man, and then suddenly a not quite so young dad. My priorities shifted in organic ways that wasn't at all a burden. And when I was in my early 20s and mid 20s, it seemed like that would be a burden. It seemed like being single was way better than not being single. Single is not really the point. More about I can do whatever I want, more or less whenever I want. I don't have to accommodate other people's wants and needs. It seemed like a burden in my 20s to have to do that. But as I started to experience it, it was the opposite of a burden. It became a joy. And so yeah. So sorry to make it all about fatherhood and not about Bitcoin or business, but yeah, it's a huge part of my life and everybody's. And so maybe that'll be useful for some people, including you.
I love that. And I honestly it's the reason why I didn't call the podcast the Bitcoin podcast, the Bitcoin Path, or anything else, because I want to make the room for every conversation. And I think especially for Bitcoiners, it's super important to talk about those things. If we are honest, that Bitcoin is great. I know that Bitcoin is great. And probably 95% of the audience knows that Bitcoin is great. Why do people watch? There is the one thing that we want to make sure we still are right. That's just it's a confirming thing of am I really right? Is that Bitcoin thing really a good thing? Then there's of course like people that learn about Bitcoin, they just like down the rabbit hole. They are also there. But then there's also the people that really like Bitcoin, and they want to hear from other Bitcoiners what they think about A, Bitcoin, but also then B, other stuff. And so when I, for example, want to hear about things in the business world or things about parenting or things, but like I rather hear it from another Bitcoiner than from someone that doesn't get Bitcoin.
Totally.
And so I think actually, I mean, this is like completely off topic now, but I think actually the Bitcoin media side of things will slowly get out of this reporting about Bitcoin and talking about Bitcoin and get more about, let's talk about topics with Bitcoiners. And we already see that. Peter McCormick is a great example, right? Totally. There's like many of those examples that just like, we have Bitcoin as a foundation and there are episodes that are just on Bitcoin, but we can talk about everything because Bitcoiners are interested in what other Bitcoiners say about other topics, if that makes any sense at all.
Oh, it does. I mean, I learned a phrase that makes me laugh even now about the worst conversationalist you ever met is somebody who says, "Well, enough about me. What do you think about me?" And there's a version of that applies for Bitcoin, right? And Bitcoiners, right? Well, enough about Bitcoin. What do you think about Bitcoin? It's so tempting to just sit in that space, and I'm as guilty of that as anybody. But I do have other interests. Another version is AI. Enough about AI. What do you think about AI? This is where my daughter makes fun of me, both about Bitcoin because I always bring it up into some conversation I'm having with her, and then AI as well. Both because she's on the cusp. I mean, she's more than a year from graduating from college, but it's right there. And thinking about internships and work and what's the post-scholastic, post-academic version of her life about to look like. I mean, I can't not at least have Bitcoin and AI in my mind because it's the most important thing that's happening, whether on the financial side or on the business side and in the world at large. And yet it's not everything, right? Where do you want to live is a component. And again, both Bitcoin and AI sort of impacted a little bit, but it's so easy to get, in those ruts. And so coming out of those ruts, I think is important. And there's a danger in going into other ruts, right? Where, politics and current events, and I do think it's important to pay attention to those things, but it's not everything. Hobbies and pastimes and interests are important as well. So being well-rounded is important. And in these Bitcoin spaces, it's so easy to just ignore everything but Bitcoin and how Bitcoin is profound. And if only everybody knew how profound it was. It reminds me a little bit two other things, and I'll pass the mic back to you. I grew up in a relatively religious household, as sort of a not fundamentalist in that sort of in sort of the crazy version of it, but very much a Jesus is coming again, and we need to let everybody know so that they're ready when he shows up. That was very much part of the ethos that I don't share today, but if you get excited about a thing, you can't not tell people about it. The other one as an adult was getting into exercise. Once I started exercise, I was like, this is amazing. I feel great. And look at all of these benefits I've got. I need to tell you about it. Bitcoin is another version of that. And so I think it's important to keep a good sense of humor and laugh at ourselves about it and make sure that we don't, just talk about it. The entertainment business is another one. You get a bunch of entertainment people together. The only thing they talk about is entertainment and maybe a little bit around the edges, but it all comes back to entertainment.
This just reminds me of something that I'm thinking about quite some time. And it has nothing to do with Bitcoin, but everything to do with Bitcoin. There is what does it need for someone to succeed in life? Kind of a thing where you need pattern recognition. And I think most people that listen to this podcast probably have quite good pattern recognition because they recognize Bitcoin as an important pattern. And I see people how they are sometimes obsessed and have very deep knowledge about something that just does not matter. Like, who are the 3 girlfriends of this one celebrity? Like, how does this make your life in any way, shape, or form better? Or like, what value does that bring? But then they have no clue about actual big things that are going on in the world. Like, AI is huge. Bitcoin is huge. There's like the globalization, the remote work thing, the freelancer thing, the going from big corporations to more and more freelance and remote workers and sole companies and smaller companies. Like, all of those trends are like hugely important and interesting to research about, and also can change your life drastically, financially, but also emotionally, and what your freedom looks in that. And I don't know why your short speech brought me to this thought, but seeing people that are so obsessed with like one small topic that just doesn't like really bring anything, like knowing all the girlfriends of I couldn't even name anything because I just don't follow this stuff. I would only embarrass myself now. But like having to know like what's going on there and this and that, I have no clue. Like, literally, I only watch the news part where it goes around the politics, what's happening in Austria, because that's the only thing that really affects me. Everything else is like, yeah, I don't really care. I mean, I do pay a little bit attention with war stuff because I just want to make sure I'm not in the middle of it, that I move in the right, that I move before everything kind of bombs around me, which I think is also an important skill. But other than that, like, focus on like improving the quality of your life and your family. And I think Bitcoin and AI is actually something very important. I actually tell this to Bitcoiners. A Bitcoiner recently asked me on a conference, like, hey, I know everything about Bitcoin. What's my next step? And I'm like, have you seen AI? Like, did you dive deep into AI? Have you looked into like maybe founding a small side hustle, maybe making a small company? Like, if you get Bitcoin, maybe the next step is, how can you improve your own life, health-wise, entrepreneurial, just like in general, with diet, like there's like a lot of different things you can dive into it, and so that's always the next step. And AI, like, if you haven't researched AI very deeply, understand it, and use it almost every single day, you should, especially if you already understand Bitcoin. So maybe it's interesting for you, for me to know, because you brought AI up. What is the thing that excites you about AI? And do you see any, that question again, I was about to ask, like, what is the connection to Bitcoin? But it's like relating everything back to Bitcoin. But yeah, anyways, like, what do you want to say about AI?
Well, I'm interested to hear what you think about the connection to them. I've been thinking about that quite a bit lately, in the context of the project I'm working on with a couple of partners. There's no direct connection to Bitcoin per se. For the product itself, so the product is a movie and series recommendation engine with an AI interface. Basically, it's an AI native app, an app layer for within the AI stack. It's called Felix, and we're in not stealth mode. Obviously, I'm talking about it here, but we have a prototype. We haven't launched the product yet, but we have a wait list at felix.me. 2 E's. Sorry, I'll go one way there. To your question, I think about it a lot. And while there will be ways for us to generate revenue within the app and sort of outside the app, it'll be both subscription and ad supported. There's commerce associated with it, and so Bitcoin will necessarily touch that. But there's no direct connection between what we're doing and Bitcoin. And so maybe we can go back to 10,000 feet in a second, but just on the AI piece alone, I think that we're finally, just in the last month or so, starting to see ways that it can impact beyond just an AI-enabled, let's say, browser or search engine or what have you, like, the AI version of Google, the AI version of whatever app that one uses. We're starting to see, we've seen that for a while, but just in the past, as we're recording, just in the past month or so, there's been versions of Claude that have come out that you can deploy on, for yourself, that can really automate stuff within your own life. And I think that where we are today, that's not going to like reverberate out in, and become a consumer product in the same way that, say, ChatGPT has so far. But you can see the path forward here, where you can just, in an AI interface, just talk to your Gmail, talk to your Facebook feed. And by talk, whether it's with your thumbs or literally speaking out loud. And I think that'll be that's a way to improve the product. I do think that there are limitations on what these systems can do. And I can't see how we get on the other side of it. I can't remember if we talked about this last time, but my in the entertainment business, people are very worried about AI for real reasons. The displacement of workers has been an issue within Hollywood really for the last 5 or 6 years. It started with COVID. We went from peak TV and the biggest global box office numbers in 2019 to crashing down, and it's we're still sort of in the throes of COVID and post-COVID, and then a set of strikes, and then the consolidation of streaming. There's a bunch of forces that have diminished the number of projects, the number of movies and series that get made, and that has a direct impact on people's on the number of people hired. Literally, it's a labor problem. And now AI coming in is yet another cataclysmic force that is going to reduce the number of people required to make a given movie or series. And that's a challenge. But it's not going to replace screenwriters, actors, directors, producers, any of the anybody below the line that sort of puts these together. There will always be people who have to do that. The tools will just allow people to do more faster, is the way I think about it. And I don't mean to be Pollyanna. There are definitely people who are going to lose out by that. But if you stay up on the tools and you use it to benefit yourself, then you have as good a shot as anybody else. And then here's the point I wanted to make. The reason I think that there will always be not just a human in the loop, but it'll be driven by human creativity, is that the AI tools don't have their own taste. They don't have their own creativity. And so the glib thing that I say to people is, unless and until the AI wakes up and wants to be a screenwriter, screenwriters don't have to worry about the AI. They're going to have tools to make them either a better or more prolific screenwriter. And then the button on that joke is, and even if it did wake up and want to be a screenwriter, what it really wants to do is direct. So there's always going to be humans that are bringing their own creativity, their own taste, their own experiences to the table to tell stories about people that matter. This is a bit of a tangent, but related. There will definitely be experiments with, this is a screenplay that somebody typed in the shortest prompt ever. Write me a screenplay, 110-page screenplay about a bank heist gone wrong. Go. Or there will be synthetic actors, and whether probably disconnected from that thing that has become pretty prevalent, where with a green screen and dots all over someone's face, you can sort of capture the facial movement of an actor and then overlay. Avatar does a version of this technology extraordinarily well, where we're seeing human emotion on screen, but overlaid with the Navi. My point is that it's really going to continue to be driven by people for the foreseeable future, every aspect of it. And so what it comes down to within the entertainment business, and I'll get back to just business writ large in a minute. What it comes down to is being familiar with the tools, using them on a regular enough basis to stay relevant as we go through this transition. And back to Bitcoin and AI, I think there are certainly businesses where you've got AI agents that are negotiating and interacting with other AI agents in pursuit of a goal. And Bitcoin itself, whether it's literal Bitcoin and Sats or a layer 2, there will be a component that needs to get baked in where the payment rails are incorporated into the way businesses and agents talk to each other. I don't think we're close enough there where we can see exactly what that's going to look like on a global basis yet. But now, if you don't mind me, putting you on the spot, what do you think about that same, maybe backwards from that where I stopped? What do you see happening the way sort of AI and Bitcoin are trending toward each other?
The most important thing for your Bitcoin journey is not buying Bitcoin, but it's how to keep them. And yes, you have maybe the right tools, but how do you actually go ahead and stick it all together so it's the most secure for you personally? Self-custody is a deeply personalized journey, and the Bitcoin way is helping you exactly finding that correct setup for you personally. They are also helping you with securing your own cybersecurity. And if you want to go one step above all that, you can even get a consultation for a Plan B residency. Go to thebitcoinway.com/Robin and you will get a 30-minute free consultation. I finally and officially mine Bitcoin. This is not just something to stack more Satoshis, but it's most importantly also to support the network. Individual miners are the ones that keep the Bitcoin network decentralized. And by the way, you get KYC free Bitcoin. That's why I use Simple Mining. I get an actual proper Bitcoin miner. They set it up for me. They repair it if it breaks down. And most importantly, they let me choose the pool and even connect my own full node. I'm completely sovereign and I'm completely in control, and I can sign up with Ocean, no account needed. I just give them a Bitcoin address and then there's mining going on. No KYC, nothing. So if you're ready to mine Bitcoin, go to simplemining.io, tell them you come from Robin, and let's mine Bitcoin together. There are there's two main sides to AI. The first side is it is another deflationary technology. The same as the tractor is, the internet is, remote work is, like all of those deflationary technologies that will bring prices down, measured in hard currencies, like That's Bitcoin, gold, all of that. So the work that if you have like if you listen to all my podcasts, you might get bored of this example, but I will bring it up again because it's my favorite example, because it's very relatable and easy to understand. If you have a farm and you have like one field that you have to work on, if you need like 4 or 5 people to work on that for like a week to make that field prepared for next season, or like to get the fruits from this field off, you might have the same time, and in the same time you can do 5 or 7 fields with one tractor and one guy. And the same thing happens, I think, with AI. So as you also said, I don't think AI is coming for your job. I think a guy or girl that knows how to use AI really effectively is coming for multiple jobs at a time. So, I mean, this podcast is kind of an example of that, where I've trimmed down everything as easy as possible. For example, if you have someone that wants to make a nice thumbnail and title that relates to the podcast, someone needs to actually watch the whole show.
Right.
This is no longer needed. You can take the transcript that you get automatically from all the platforms you record with, and you just put it in ChatGPT and ask, what are the main topics? Like, what did he talk about? Give me the summary, give me key takeaways, and then you can just take them and make a thumbnail and title, and it's accurate. Because of AI, you actually know what actually has been said in the podcast, and he analyzes every single word that you as a human would never do. Like you would have biases in there. You would listen to parts more closely and to other parts less closely. And so this is just like one very small example how AI is a deflationary technology, a force that will bring productivity to the world and bring prices of everything down. Now, where does Bitcoin come in there? I think Bitcoin comes in there because AI not only brings things down, but also makes things digitally copied, and maybe even in the physical world copied. So if you see now a person doing something really, really weird in a video, you automatically think, is this AI? Is this an AI video? Even if it's real, it's the thought in your head that counts. Right. Even if it's a completely real video, if, I don't know, like Trump goes on a press conference and says, I want to bomb Russia. Like those bastards, I can't, like they have to be bombed because I don't know why they are talking so badly in Ukraine, like whatever he says. If he actually says that, everyone will say it's AI, or has that thought, is that AI? And this is the dangerous spot that we are in. We no longer can say for certain, and we're very close to that point, we soon can no longer say for certain if something is AI or not, without being like actually physically present. Now, next step, what happens if robots get so good and you can have like face masks of a guy, like this already is happening, and you just even don't know it in the real world? There could be a robot, like now that example gets really crazy. There could be a robot Donald Trump up on stage that looks really, really real, that talks like him, walks like him, looks like him, and give a speech, while the real Donald Trump is somewhere else.
Playing golf, probably.
Yeah, golfing. And so I say all that because I think we will be in a world where you just can't know what's real and not. And then it's like, what is the worth in this world of an immutable ledger that can't be manipulated, that you can verify for yourself, that is unmanipulated and is a token that you can transfer with the speed of light across continents? Like, what is the value of that? Probably pretty valuable in an AI world. And there's actually, and then I will stop. There's an actual AI expert that was on the Diary of a CEO. The AI expert, I never heard of him. He's not a Bitcoiner at all. And the Diary of a CEO host, he has Bitcoin, but like he's not a Bitcoin at all. He's a non-Bitcoin podcast. And he asks him around like 1.5, 2 hours in, okay, 2045, what should people do? What is a thing that people miss and should do to prepare for AI? And he just sat there and said, buy Bitcoin. And I'm like, who is that guy?
Right.
And this is AI expert that nobody knows in Bitcoin. And I researched, like he barely talked about Bitcoin at all, but he's a like AI guru and says, you need to have Bitcoin in an AI world. It's the only currency that makes sense in an AI world. And I'm like, wow. Like, now my bias is out because he did not have a bias. He was not a Bitcoiner. He's just like AI expert coming into Bitcoin. Those are, sorry for rambling. I forgot my main points.
No.
This is kind of my points around Bitcoin and AI.
No, it's a really great point that I hadn't thought about, but what popped in my head as you were talking there is the idea of proof of work, right? What's so profound about there's so many things that are profound about Bitcoin, but one of them is literally the distributed ledger and the consensus action that maintains that ledger. That's the kind of thing we're going to need in an AI first, AI driven world. To your point, we won't know what's true or what's meaningful or what is untouched by, for example, marketing. One of the things that had us start Felix is this idea of word of mouth being a really important component of, should I see this movie? What should I watch tonight? Will I like that thing that's coming out next weekend? It's a taste thing, but it's also a word of mouth thing. There's so much AI slop that's coming down the pike that is amplified by marketing dollars that you could see a time where you just won't know what's good because there will be so many pretty convincing forgive the expression, but so convincing avatars telling us that it's good. But if you see, I don't know, I'm blanking on a movie. Mercy. So there's a new movie in the that came out this past weekend from Amazon. I think Amazon and MGM with Chris Pratt called Mercy. So if you see Mercy and you tell me that Mercy is good, then if I also know the rest of your taste, do you think whatever John Wick is good? Do you think the Tomorrow War was good, etc.? If I know what your taste is and you say Mercy is good, then I'm going to be more likely to know whether I'm going to like it, as opposed to this world that you were sort of alluding to that is so AI driven that we don't know what's true and good anymore. And so just on a taste basis, things that are culture inflected, whether it is movies and series or books or podcasts or travel or whatever, restaurants and bars for that matter, stuff that's taste oriented, we still want to know what humans whose taste we know, what they think of the thing. And so that's what Felix, that's sort of the mission behind Felix. And in a world where you're talking about it, if you think about it, from a particular angle, the thing that I just described is a proof of work. I have seen Mercy. I liked it. I have seen Mercy. I didn't like it. A third person says, I've seen Mercy and I can see both sides, right? You want to know those nuances from a human, and that proof of work, something that's authentic and authenticated both, not unlike Bitcoin, is going to be sort of baked into where we end up, certainly over the next 20 years. I have a hard time seeing 20 years out like anymore. Actually, no, that's not true. I can definitely see 20 years from now, but not necessarily where technology is going. I can't remember if it was Bill Gates or somebody in that realm back in the dawn of the personal computing age, said something along the lines of people tend to overestimate the impact of a given technology in the short term, but really underestimate it over the long term. And I still think that that's true for Bitcoin, even though it's been around for 15 years ish, more than that now. And as AI, is really becoming something that's usable by non-developers, non-engineers, we are way early there. And so it's impossible in my mind to see where we will end up in 2045, except, like you said, by Bitcoin, because that does seem that is going to stand the test of time and be one of the few representations of money that isn't degraded by all the rest of the forces that are at play right now.
I couldn't agree more, like 100%. It's super interesting, AI and what is also happening with Bitcoin. And I think this is just something now for every Bitcoiner that thinks about, like, maybe I haven't researched AI enough. Like, this is your point, this is your sign. Go ahead and do like right. Try it out. Like download one app like ChatGPT, Gemini, whatever you want to use, and just try it out, speak with it, ask what are the possibilities. I recently start doing this more and more, where I asked ChatGPT especially, hey, I have this problem, or I want to do this. Ask me 50 questions around all of that, so you know everything from my perspective, my situation, and all the environmental impacts, and then give me advice based on my answers. And this is such a powerful thing to do. I'm just discovering it in the last few months, where I changed my channel around that, made a huge impact. So many different things that I'm doing. I just hey, I have this situation, ask me 50 questions, and then I answer all the questions, and then it comes back with advice and have everything summarized. And sometimes actually just answering the questions myself is already helping me. Just going through every question that might come up is oh wait, I've never looked at it that way. And so I just encourage people to use AI. And I know there's always this it's a data thing, don't put everything in there, privacy and all of that, and be careful with it. But honestly, it's one of those technologies. The same with Bitcoin. If you don't use it, someone else that will use it will outcompete you. The same with gunpowder, AI, Bitcoin, like it's you have to use it, even if you don't like it, because otherwise you will be outcompeted by someone.
That's for sure. I do think that the mitigating factor that I've been thinking about lately in the context of starting this new company is one way I've been thinking about it. It's not like you have to start from scratch with AI, right? AI is really more of a concept. It's a specific piece of technology that is increasingly getting infused into the tools that we use. And so it's whether it's the G Suite and interacting with a version of Gemini within the context of your Gmail or your calendar, like it's going to be increasingly easy to use. The thing that I've been playing with for the past week or so, well, more than that, but as we've been starting this company, there's a bunch of different tools that one uses, both for technology and document storage and strategy and what have you, managing all of the different components. And we're using a tool called Notion. My co-founder has been a Notion devotee for several years, and the AI tools that are increasingly getting built into tools like Notion are extraordinary, and it really is it's a productivity force multiplier. So you can the silly example is we're about to go do a fundraise, right? It's a seed stage fundraise, and so all of the two co-founders, so the three of us are putting the people that we know into the spreadsheet, or it's a Notion page, and then there's a bunch of people that we don't actually know but are like one step removed from us, that we probably want to reach out to, a warm-ish introduction, not completely cold. And the point of this is that within Notion, once you first of all, you can tell Notion set up a spreadsheet for the fundraise, and you can give it a couple of parameters, and suddenly it's there, and then you type a few names in, and then within a given name, you can literally, it's got a little AI thing. You click the button and say, tell me everything you know about that person, and put it on the page. And all of the research just within a few minutes is there. It's slightly more complicated than I described, in that you want to be specific about the kinds of information you're asking for. But you can do that in English. You don't have to. Anyway, it's just a huge time saver, and you're getting more and more information available in the place you need it, that you couldn't have unless you hired, an army of interns to go grab them. And so again, it's a trade-off, right? Like, so at this stage, it's perfect for us. We don't, we're pre-raised, so we're, doing everything out of pocket, and mostly doing it ourselves. And so it's force multiplying us. Downstream, I can see how this would keep us from hiring quite as many entry-level people. We're definitely going to be, as we expand the engineering team, we're definitely going to be hiring people who are effectively 10x engineers, because they've got full stack skills in their brains, as well as using these tools that make them go fast and smooth. And I could talk about this at length, but to your point, it's just, we're getting to the point where it's not optional. You have to be comfortable with the tool set, but it's not like you have to go learn a brand new thing from scratch. You don't have to be a frontier model engineer yourself in order to use LLM within the context of the thing you're trying to achieve. That's been true for writing for a while, and is increasingly true for building things that with technology, like we are with Felix.
Really, really cool. This podcast has been like really cool. I go increasingly without a plan into podcasts, because I would have never drawn the line that we have walked through today on a plan. It would have been it would be impossible for me to predict that. One more thing I had on my plan though was treasury companies. Now we don't have like that much time left, but I think I just want to have like your overall take on how you look at treasury companies and what role they're kind of playing, or what role they will maybe play in the future of Bitcoin, and maybe even like in the context of AI now.
Yeah. So the way first, let me start by saying I am not if you want to talk about treasury companies with a true expert, then talking to Peter at the Bitcoin Advisor would be like the first place I would start, because he has sort of not just a broad knowledge of it, but a really deep knowledge of it. He can sort of see. It's like he can see around corners. Like, if you haven't had him on recently, you definitely should. But from my perspective, which is again. So been around Bitcoin for 7-ish years, have seen the rise, more than that now, but anyway, so have seen the rise of the dedicated treasury companies like Strategy, and I'm totally blanking on the other sort of prominent one. But anyway, to the point, I think that those companies will essentially become sort of a next generation bank more than it is just buy and hold Bitcoin, and the whole point is just to own Bitcoin. It would be like buying a piece of gold reserves, which buy some and have some, but I think the utility around companies that hold Bitcoin on their balance sheet is the part that's more exciting to me. And I think as we go through the next cycle, more than a cycle, as we get into 27, 8, 9, 10, 30 and out, I think having Bitcoin on a company's balance sheet will become the default, that one holds their one holds EBITDA, one holds their profits in that place, because you want to continue to deploy capital within the company to grow it for its purpose, which is not in and of itself to hold Bitcoin most of the time. The purpose could be, developing real estate, or building an app, or everything in between. Having Bitcoin on one's balance sheet, as part of the treasury, will become ubiquitous, and that will strengthen those companies in ways that will be remarkable. So I wish I had a more say informed take on this, but I think there's only room for a couple of significant, full-blown dedicated treasury companies like Strategy. A couple of them around the world, I think, will be enough. But I think everybody's going to have Bitcoin on their balance sheets as part of their treasury. I think being able to borrow against it, use it as a tool, like we talked about earlier in the conversation. I think using Bitcoin as a tool to enhance the strength of the company in general, and the ability to return value for the shareholders of those companies, it's going to increasingly be non-optional and an obvious strategy, no pun intended, for every healthy company to do. So that's my take. I would have said a version of that probably 6 or 8 months ago as well. So my view on that hasn't changed. But now that I say it all out loud, I'm wondering if I need to do a little more research. Do you have a take on that? Where do you stand with treasuries or treasury companies, Bitcoin treasury companies as an asset class?
I was very negligent against it. I was very opposed to it for a very long time, up until I think December, January, some like the last 1.5 months. It has changed my mind a little bit, maybe 1.5, 2 months. Before that, even having Saylor on the podcast, even wasn't this 100K party, even having like 20, 30 people that really know a lot about treasury companies on, and asking them a lot about treasury companies didn't open me up. There was Chase Palmery on the podcast, and he just dropped a line of hey, Strategy could become the biggest company in the world. That sparked my curiosity enough that I actually looked into Strategy. And now I go really deep into Strategy. I really, really deeply researched that stock, because I want to understand it. And the more I look into it, the more I love it.
Oh, yeah?
It's all those negative notions I had about it turned out to be either not justified or just simply wrong. For example, that they are over leveraged, as it's just not right. It's just not the case. They might actually be without debt at all in 2029, 2030-ish, if their convertible notes run out and they focus completely on preferreds. And yes, I do see preferreds as capital and not debt, which some people might disagree with, and people are like, oh, they have dividend obligation. Yeah, but they can meet those dividend obligations easily, right, especially long run. And so and then they can raise money with I think what makes me really bullish on strategy, and I'm very careful with that to say, because I'm not yet done with all the research I want to do, and I will drop a long video once I'm done with like my full analysis on strategy. But right now, I see it as an amplified Bitcoin play, and Stretch as their iPhone moment to that play. And Stretch is the single reason why I'm so bullish on it. Without Stretch, I might just not buy it. It's still a great company. Without Stretch, it's still like they're doing phenomenal. They're doing everything they can. But without Stretch, I don't have a big enough narrative for me to like, wow, they will be huge. But Stretch is such an easy to understand and simple product. I told about Stretch now like 3 or 4 people, and all of them want to do invest immediately. They're like, oh, I have to put my money in there. The only question they have is like, how risky is that? Like what if my money all of a sudden is gone, because it's still like it's an investment. And so once they've proven that they can do this Stretch thing for like 2, 3, 4 years, and they have the right messaging and the marketing around it, and it stretches now already in Robinhood and like other brokerage, and like the distribution is all figured out, that thing will print money. Like I truly believe that. But as said, like I'm not yet done with the strategy research. I'm getting strategy pilled more and more.
I'm looking forward to seeing that deep dive when you build it. You know, it reminds me, if you don't mind me sort of testing this out aloud with you, it reminds me of what Netflix was doing when it's shifted from DVD to streaming. The 3-sentence version of this was Netflix made the decision that they could see that the other that the studios, and both movie and TV studios, were going to start their own streamers. They could see that coming down the pike. They even said I can't remember who did the phrase, but they wanted to become HBO before HBO became Netflix. That was something that was really relatively early on, and there wasn't any, like, there was no streaming wars at the time, but they could see that it was coming. And if you think that that's happening, then the obvious follow-up thought is, well, all of these library titles that we have on Netflix are going to no longer be available, because if you're competing with us, you're not going to give us your best stuff. You're going to reserve it for yourself. And so the response to that necessarily is to create, to finance as much original programming as they could. And we were in, at the time, a really, really low interest rate environment. And what Netflix could see was there was a period of time where, if they could borrow a huge, they were public already, right? So they had access to public markets, not unlike Strategy does. And what they could see was, if they could build enough, if they could get enough momentum and build enough subscribers, then they could borrow not literally infinite money, but they could borrow a lot of money at really low interest rates to get to the point where there literally be billions of dollars in capital expenditure, in debt every year, be cash flow negative, but be borrowing constantly to be able to get to the point where the subscriber growth and the subscriber revenue would grow to and surpass the amount of money that they were spending on new programming. And I think even early on, they knew, or they penciled out that if they could get to 120 to 140 million subscribers globally, then they would go, then it would flip. Suddenly, even if they wanted to, go to the capital markets and continue to borrow, the total amount of money that they would borrow would be able to be paid off within 4 or 5 years if they chose to do it that way. And that's exactly what happened. I don't remember how much off-balance sheet financing they raised. It was, I could be wrong, but I think it was in the $20 to $25 billion worth of debt that they accumulated through this process. But then since it flipped, I think they're cash flow positive to the $4 or $5 billion a year. I don't go that deep in the companies. I like to sort of understand what's happening, but I like the actual numbers are less important to me than directionally. So anyway, that bet totally paid off. By the time interest rates went up, where it no longer made sense to borrow, $2-3 billion a year to finance new production, they were making more than that in profits and were able to service their debt and continue to grow their original programming budget to the point where it became sort of stable. I think they've been flat for the last couple of years. But back to your point, and to get back to strategy, the money glitch was something that Saylor could see coming down the pike, and then it's unsustainable in other in different kinds of environments, and having alternatives to just their the shares of the company, having alternative financial products be part of that was a brilliant move. And to your point, over the next 3 or 4 years, we'll see it'll be clear how good a bet that was. And yes, it's very possible that they grow to and surpass the largest of the companies that are out there now.
Yeah. For me, it was really interesting to see seeing Stretch trading at par after they pay out the dividends in a month where Bitcoin is trading downwards, where there's not a lot of excitement in there. I'm like, wow, that thing could print money. I just like literally like they could be a cyberspace central bank, like literally, giving people 11% while cashing in the 20-30% that they make with the Bitcoin, and they make like all the other products look so stupid. If you have like cash laying around that gives you like 3%, 4%, 2%, like but
what are you doing?
It's crazy for me. But as with the small thing with like, I'm not yet done with my research. I have to look deeper, and I also encourage everyone to consider the risk of strategy, because it is a company and not Bitcoin, and there's like different risks. Just to that. Thank you so much, Jason. That's been like an amazing podcast. We have an end routine in the podcast, as you might know from 1 year ago, where the previous guest is asking a question for the next guest without knowing who the next guest actually is. And the previous guest asked you the question, what price do you think will Bitcoin be when it flips gold? And I just explained quickly the context to that question, because we talked about gold and how it outperformed everything, and how when I came into Bitcoin, the flipping moment would have been like 700,000-800,000 euros, dollars in Bitcoin. Now, with the current market capitalization of gold, it would be 1.8 million. And so it's like, if the devaluation continues, like what will be the point where Bitcoin flips gold? Will it be like 2 million, 5 million, 10 million? Obviously, we have no clue, but I've been amazed how quickly the US dollar gets devalued.
Yeah. Well, so this would be just me throwing a dart at the board, because the macro of it all is not my specialty and not something I think about a lot. So, someone else would come in with a more scientific, or at least precise way of thinking about it. Like, it reminds me of that phrase, precision without accuracy, right? You build something really, really intricate, some model, and because it's all based on assumptions, it's no more accurate than anything else, but someone else who studies it would at least be more precise. To your point, I think, let me answer it this way. So I don't know, I don't have a number. Like, no, nobody knows the future, but I do think that the trends, the stuff that impacts like what would happen, is only going to continue. We're only going to continue to print more money. I think the uncertainty around the world, sort of geopolitically, I don't see that end. Like I like everybody, I want it to end as soon as possible. But I just don't see. I don't see stability across the globe happening. So I think that there will be pressures to continue to increase liquidity, increase the money supply more or less indefinitely, and regardless of individual quantitative easing or tightening policies at the Fed. I just don't see these trends stopping. So I think that the stuff that is impacting the price of gold and impacting the price of Bitcoin will continue. It is interesting, as we're recording this, gold has been ripping and Bitcoin has stayed fairly flat. I don't have the answer, so I'll pose a question to the next person as part of my answer. What I want to know is what is there a macro trend that it isn't already present in the marketplace that will change the relatively flat dynamics that of supply and demand that are keeping Bitcoin's price steady for the more or less steady for the past year or so? So to state it again, is there some macro thing that hasn't quite happened yet that needs to, in order for us to get to the place where Bitcoin would flip gold? I don't know the answer to that. I'm going to be looking forward to seeing who it comes on and what the answer is. But to come back to the price question that you asked about flipping gold, I mean, I think it's going to be, like you said, it's going to be probably a couple $1 million, and I think we're a ways away from that. But if Saylor is right that we're getting to 13 million, what's his time frame? It's like 2035, something like that. I think it will happen, and not that far out, not 2026, 27, 28 maybe. But I think within the next 10 years, we should see that happen for all of the reasons that he and other scholars of it have predicted.
Yeah, people with models predict the timing of Bitcoin flipping gold around 2030 to 2035. The question is like, what the heck will be the price at?
Right.
I have no clue. But yeah, like we also discussed in previous episodes how gold is a leading indicator for Bitcoin, usually like 100 days, and it's no longer the case. It's like gold broke that pattern, which usually was true in the past. So let's see what's happening.
It'll be
thank you so much. Yeah, like it's. But I think also like I think the macro side is a little bit different because I think in 2026 there will be a lot more liquidity, and Bitcoin unfortunately still trades like a risk asset and not like gold. So there's like also the narrative mismatch between Bitcoin, how it trades, and what Bitcoin actually is. So like has to have a lot of educational. That might actually be the answer to the question. Like there's no macro event. There's like, we need to fill that education gap between what Bitcoin actually is and how people trade Bitcoin. But yeah, thank you so much, Jason, for being on and being such a pleasant guest to talk with. Before I let you go, where can people find you? Where can people find your company and the stuff that you're doing?
Yeah. Oh, thanks for the opportunity. Thank you again for having me on, Robin. It was a delightful conversation as it was last time. Thanks again. As far as connecting me, so I'm on X. My handle is at @JScoggins. There, it's pretty easy to find me with a search. And then the new company, like I said earlier, is called Felix with. Let me go that way. Felix with 2 E's. And we have a waitlist open so people can sign up if you're curious about what we're doing. Felix.me, M-E is the URL. It'll be probably a couple of months before we have a product that we're start to open up to early waitlist people, but we're definitely building it now, and we welcome anybody to hop on. And if you're interested in what we're doing, hop on the waitlist. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jason, for being on, and also thank you so much for everyone that is watching and listening for joining us today. As always, I'll be back. This content is for educational and entertainment purposes only and does not constitute financial advice.